Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which will air later tonight. Before that, she did the Howard Stern Show and a much anticipated sit down on ABC's The View. And listen to how she answered a question about her differences with President Biden.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact. Listen, I plan on having a Republican in my cabinet. You asked
I got a list.
Yeah, right. You asked me what's the difference between Joe Biden and me. Well, that will be one of the differences. I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet because I don't feel burdened by letting pride get in the way of a good idea.
CNN's Eva McKend and CNN's Kristen Holmes are with us now. All right, Eva, let's start with you for more on the vice president's big day of media appearances. What has stood out to you, including that answer there?
Yes, well, that answer getting the most attention from the former president's campaign. But she went on The View to, in part, outline a new policy proposal. Brianna, she's talked for years about the sandwich generation. Those are adults who have to simultaneously take care of their kids and their parents. She has credibility on this issue because she's talked about it so much. Groups like Care in Action, a big organizing force this election, support her as a result. And essentially what she's advocating for, what she said a Harris administration would include, is expanding Medicare to cover basic needs. Let's take a listen to how this would work.
What I am proposing is that basically what we will do is allow Medicare to cover in-home health care. And it's about dignity for that individual. It's about independence for that individual.
Yes.
I mean, people are of declining skills to some extent, but their dignity their pride has not declined. They want to stay in their home. They don't want to go somewhere else. Plus, for the family to send them to a residential care facility, to hire somebody is so expensive.
Now, Brianna, she was also on Howard Stern today, and she blasted the former president, arguing that he's easily manipulated by dictators, that when it came to the pandemic, he botched the whole response. But it is that response that she initially gave to how she would be different from President Biden that is getting the most attention on the right, because this is a persistent challenge for her. She has tried to characterize herself as the change candidate, but she, of course, is in the administration. She did say, though, that she would put a Republican in her cabinet if elected.
Yeah, she did say that. And Kristen, I should say, if our audience can hear, we do apparently have a little construction. We're going to get that turned off if you can hear it. I understand former President Trump is teaming up with RFK Jr. for a virtual town hall. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, the theme of this town hall is Make America Healthy Again, something that Donald Trump never really cared about until, of course, Robert F. Kennedy dropped out of the race, and then he made it part of his platform. I think the thing to keep in mind here is that this race is going to be decided in the margins, and any kind of votes that the Trump campaign or the Harris campaign can secure are votes that they believe that they are going to need to take them across the finish line in November, and that includes those independent voters. And the one thing to keep in mind about particularly RFK Jr. voters is they don't typically go to the polls, or at least that's the concern among the Trump campaign. So how do you actually get them from being RFK supporters to being Donald Trump supporters to getting them to actually cast your ballot in November? Well, the hope is that by teaming up with RFK, you're actually showing that it's not just that he's given the endorsement, but he's going to be part of the next administration. You might think that 6% in some of these states that RFK held is not that much, but if you can even get a fraction of that to actually show up in November, the Trump team thinks that could help them win. Now, whether or not this is a strategy that actually works, obviously, as we know, the big question is, can you actually get these people to cast their ballots? But this is how they're doing it. This is why you're hearing him make promises about RFK being part of the transition team, as well as Tulsi Gabbard, trying to get those voters to actually show up at the polls by basically giving them an incentive that is beyond just an endorsement.
All right, Kristen, Eva, thank you so much to both of you for the reporting. Let's talk a little bit more about what is happening in this race with CNN political director David Chalian. And David, let's start with what we just heard from Vice President Harris on The View, where she initially said, she didn't think she would do anything differently than Biden here in the last four years, that is kind of music to the ears of Republicans.
Yeah, when I first heard it, it reminded me, do you remember back in the 2012 campaign when Mitt Romney said something to the kind of corporations are people, right? And Democrats jumped on that. And the danger of something like that is when you say something that feeds into an already problematic narrative. And as Eva noted, a problematic narrative for Kamala Harris is that she is attached to an unpopular incumbent President Biden. And so by saying, though you say every day you're going to turn the page, and then all of a sudden saying you can't think of anything comes to mind that you would do differently, it just gives a huge opening to Republicans, which part of their main strategic effort since Harris has taken over the top of the ticket has been to attach her firmly to unpopular President Biden. And so this gives entree for them to do that in this closing stretch in a new, fresh way.
I always think when candidates go on venues that may be perceived as kind of friendly to them or someplace where they might be able to relax, actually, that's when they need to be a little careful. We've seen it time and again. That's where they can actually get in trouble. Former President Trump, he's, of course, pulled way ahead when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the issue of immigration, which are issues that voters say are very important to them. Is she closing the gap on this at all?
She is. There's no doubt if you look when those issues are asked, who do you trust more, Trump or Harris on those issues? Since she took over the ticket, she has narrowed the gap, certainly has narrowed the gap on those two issues from where Trump was against Joe Biden. They are still in the aggregate of the polling that is out there. Those two issues are still Trump positive issues. He is still seen as more trustworthy on those issues, or seen by voters to better handle those issues than she is on the whole. But she has narrowed that gap, and that is critical work for her. Narrowing the gap on issue number one, the economy, is something she wants to spend every day trying to do with voters between now and they cast their ballots.
So many interviews that she's doing. I think now we can hear the construction.
I don't know if somebody's going to actually fall through
I hope
the ceiling.
I have confidence. I have relative confidence in the ceiling, so we're gonna say it's okay. It's just a little noisy. It's kind of the grab bag, like a variety pack of interviews she's doing. The View, the Howard Stern Show, the Late Show. She had this podcast, the Call Her Daddy podcast. What are what voters is she not trying to reach here?
Well, as you know, because the race is so close, right? Any little slice of the electorate could make a difference here, but I think it's pretty clear, right? You go on The View, if you want to talk to female voters, that's largely the audience there. She has a huge advantage with female voters. She wants to extend that advantage. She wants to diminish Trump's advantage with men. Go on Howard Stern. Obviously, he has a lot of female listeners too, but that is a place where men are tuning in and listening, and the opportunity to try and chip away at Trump's advantage among men. So you can see how with each interview, she's trying to target a different kind of audience, and believe me, the campaign looks very carefully at exactly what members of the electorate are reached by a given show, and that's how they make decisions about where to put the candidate out.
Yeah, she could come here. We could talk about politics. We could talk about home improvement. We could talk about all kinds of topics. David Chalian, thank you so much for your insights. And when we come back, we have more on our breaking news coverage of Hurricane Milton, one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes ever reported, and a storm that is growing as it moves closer to Florida.
To be impacted, at the very least impacted, if not devastated, by Hurricane Milton, this hurricane that is now close to a Category 5 storm, flirting with Category 5 winds, is headed directly for this region. And there are so many complex issues at play. In large part, it has to do with recovery that's still ongoing from Hurricane Helene, which hit this area about 2 weeks ago. There are enormous piles of debris throughout this area, throughout the west coast of Florida. And now we're talking about a 15-foot storm surge potentially on top of that. We want to discuss with a local leader. Joining us now is Joe Ayoub. He's the mayor of Safety Harbor, Florida. Mayor, we're grateful that you joined us this afternoon. I understand that you actually evacuated in part because you've seen what this storm can do. I wonder if your residents are also heeding the warnings.
Well, Boris, thank you for having me on this show. And yes, there's mandatory evacuation orders for people that live in zones A, B, and C. I live in evacuation zone C, so I'm following orders just like everyone else should be right now. This is a serious, catastrophic storm that's coming our way. We are expecting widespread power outages. We're expecting trees to come down. We're expecting utilities, maybe water, maybe sewer, to have issues. So we're asking residents, please don't take any chances. If you live in an evacuation zone or you live near the water, please evacuate now.
And Mayor, when it comes to this debris that's been left over by Hurricane Helene, it's simply too late to do anything about it, right? This isn't going to go anywhere.
Right. So before we even knew that Milton was going to be an issue, we were projecting, as well as other cities in the area, it would take at least 30 to 60 days to clean the debris from Hurricane Helene. So we had a 2-week window. We were doing the best we could. We hired outside contractors to take the lead on this and do the bulk of the work. But every time the city hired a contractor, the governor would redirect those resources to the barrier islands, to beach communities, to help them out with their needs. But we got frustrated residents in Safety Harbor because everything wasn't picked up before this storm is coming, and now those big piles of debris are going to become big piles of projectiles. So we're asking residents, if you can, to please bundle them up, secure them, cover them, and if you can, move them into a garage or a shelter. But it's definitely an area of concern and frustration for residents right now. Not just Safety Harbor, but all of Pinellas County.
Yeah, and Mayor, quickly, I want to give you an opportunity to address those residents that may be hesitant to leave. They perhaps got through Helene and figured that they would be fine through this storm. They appear to be two different storms headed in the same area, but potentially in different directions, and that has an enormous impact when it comes to the Tampa Bay area, right?
Yeah, this storm could have huge implications. We got a lot of storm surge from Hurricane Helene. We're expecting greater storm surge, up to 15 feet from Hurricane Milton, and that's no joke. If people were around for Hurricane Helene, you would have saw firsthand the damage and the flooding that it caused. I mean, it totally washed away our pier. It caused a lot of damage to our marina. I know people that live just a couple blocks from me whose houses were more or less destroyed by it. So this is not something to mess around with. This storm is coming directly at us. If it happens to come directly at us or a little north of us, that storm surge is going to whip that water right into Tampa Bay. It's going to create real big issues for us. And on top of it, people are going to be without power and possibly water, their utilities for a while. So there's really not a lot of sense in staying put at this point.
Yeah, and as I've heard from officials over and over again, the time to get out is right now. The mayor of Safety Harbor, Florida, Joe Ayoub, thank you so much for joining us. We wish your community the best, and please keep us posted if there's a message you want us to get out there.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. On that note about evacuating folks in this area of Treasure Island, all access is going to be cut off at 7 p.m. tonight. Just outside City Hall, there's been a bus that's been posted there. I was told that locally officials had until 4 p.m. to register to be evacuated. The last time I spoke with a bus driver who left a short while ago and appears to have come back, she said that no one had gotten on the bus. I talked to residents that were kind of on the fence about leaving. I'm hoping that those residents will soon get on the bus and get out of here. Again, the Tampa Bay area has not seen a direct hit from a hurricane in something like 100 years. And I want to go to Isabel Rosales now, because Isabel, you're very familiar with this area and what it could mean to see a 15-foot storm.
Now, if you're going to get out now. You have time today. Time will be running out very shortly.
I want Donald.
Now, can you slice that?